Hello, my name is Thomas Hopkins, and I'm discussing the Russian annexation of Crimea. I'm going to start by giving a brief overview of the situation. So, in November 2013, peaceful Euromaidan protests turned violent and deadly. After this, Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych was expelled from power and fled to Moscow. The protests came after Yanukovych chose Russian Eurasian Customs Union over joining the European Union. In the aftermath of the overthrow, Russian forces with no insignia invaded Crimea with little to no resistance. In doing so, Russia claimed Crimea as a federal subject and the city of Sevastopol as a federal city. These actions were deemed illegal by Ukraine and most of the international community. Soon after, the regions of Donetsk and Luhansk rebelled in a separatist movement. These movements were backed by Russia, and the fighting continues to this day. The perspective of the West is that Russia is trying to take advantage of a divided Ukraine and attempting to control the state by aggressive force. The West feels that Ukraine's sovereignty has been attacked and that Russia is moving on an expansionist agenda. Sanctions have been put in place to attempt to halt the fighting, but this seems to have only made things worse. Russia views it very differently. They view Ukraine, especially Crimea, as a mostly Russian country. They also saw the overthrow of Yanukovych as a plot to get a more Euro-friendly president in power. After all, the reason Yanukovych was expelled was because he'd backed Russia over Europe. Putin also sees NATO as expansionist and has been attempting to gain Russian border countries which would allow NATO troops right next to Russia. The liberalist view of the Ukraine situation obviously would back the European Union and NATO, because they are large international organizations. And in a liberalist view, international organizations are a key role in achieving worldwide peace. This view would correlate to Obama's outlook on the situation by backing NATO and installing sanctions to Russia. The realist view, which sees the world as anarchic and full of conflict, would say Russia is supporting its own national interests in Ukraine because countries will naturally do so. In a realist view, Putin is motivated to keep Ukraine a Russian-friendly country, to either maintain his defensive security from NATO powers getting too close, or to enhance the power he holds in the region. Either way, a realist would not be very surprised that Russia has intervened in Ukraine. Some of my thoughts on the situation is that the European Union tried to pull Ukraine, a country that has a known division in it, while the Western Ukraine wanting to be more European and the East wanting to keep its strong ties with Russia. This further divided the country, ultimately leading to an overthrow of the government and a civil war. NATO also tried to get too close to Russia, because if Ukraine was a NATO country, it could place NATO troops in Crimea, where Russia has rented a naval port in Sevastopol until 2042. This would bring a serious conflict of interest in Ukraine. I also think Russia acted too hastily and could have diffused the situation by more diplomatic means. Another reason for Ukraine to be such a national interest to Russia is that the majority of Russian oil pipelines run straight through Ukraine into the rest of Europe. For Russia to lose control of these oil pipelines would significantly decrease the monopoly it has in the region. After discussing the Ukraine crisis under Obama's administration, I'd like to discuss the more recent view of the situation under the new Trump administration. It is well known that Putin was very interested in the 2016 U.S. election, and many people believe that he might have even tried to interfere with the outcome. Regardless, Putin has expressed that he is happy that Trump won the election. Trump has also declared that he would try and mend relationships with the United States and Russia. But in the last week, since Trump had a phone call discussing relationships with Putin, the fighting has dramatically increased, despite the Minsk II agreement. Since the fighting increased, the U.S. decided not to remove the sanctions, but to also provide Ukraine with more weapons, and in so, hoping to be more costly to Russia to keep supporting the separatists. Trump also has decided that he will back off in Syria and let the Russians handle the Islamic State there. Many political analysts have suggested that Putin has increased the fighting in Ukraine to try and test Trump after the phone call with him earlier this week. And it doesn't make much sense for us to strengthen our ties in the old Soviet borderlands when we don't have much geopolitical ties there anyway. and for us to weaken our sense in Syria when all along Trump said that he was going to try and beat the Islamic State. It'll be interesting watching these roles play out. Thank you.